How do you know if you're underperforming or you are under recovered? I'm Suzanne Rath, and you're listening to Endures for your daily dose of endurance leadership and life lessons. Now, as you may have heard me talk about before, this is the third month of the year, and we are on to the third stage of Endures, which is Drive. And Drive is not just about how we endlessly push through, but also how we know when to change pace or when to pivot. And yesterday I read an article about when we start to lose pace when we're running during our training that made me think about the parallels between this and our businesses and our leadership. So often in a training block, and I think this happens to every single one of us if we are training for anything, if you're a runner, you'll probably relate to this. When you hit a point, maybe you just feel really overtired, maybe you feel like you're getting sick, maybe you just have a lot of work stress, and all of a sudden you start feeling like you've gone off the pace. And there's a little catastrophizing part of your mind that starts thinking, oh, maybe I'm never going to get that pace back again. Maybe it's just gone. Maybe my fitness is gone. Is it the end of the world? And I think sometimes we have these seasons or these chapters in our business or our leadership as well, where we just feel like things are a bit boring or nothing's happening, or we were making all that progress and things have stagnated. And so when I read this article in Running State, I wanted to see what the parallels were between those running sessions where we feel like we're totally off the pace and times when we feel like we might be off the pace in our business or our leadership. And so there's 5 points, and I would love to dive into them. So the first one is this thing of some days are just slower. And this is fluctuations in when we train, in our hormones, in our nutrition, in so many different variables. And when we think about that in our business or our lives, obviously the same things apply, but also probably the core lesson is that not every single dip is a problem to fix, right? Just as our performance fluctuates if we're running or training, the same in our business and our leadership. So we don't need to react to everything. If we move to correct every little problem, sometimes it's actually drawing us away from the big picture things. It's drawing us away from the things that are going to move the needle, from our vision, from our major goals, if we're just constantly reacting to every little thing. And so a better thing, whether it's in training, in leadership, in life, in business, whatever, is to look at that overall trend. What is the big picture as opposed to the little micro trend? Not just looking at today, not just looking at the thing that just didn't go quite according to plan, but what is the massive trend? Now, the second piece, and again, this applies to training, it applies to life, is hidden fatigue. So maybe you're carrying more than you think. So with running, that might be previous efforts. It might be stress outside of running. It might be what we eat. It might be a lack of sleep. And of course, the same things apply to in business, leadership, and life. But also, I'd love to draw you back to this concept of residual load and attention residue. So, where are we just holding on to residue from decisions, from unclosed loops, from clutter, from emails that haven't been actioned? And remembering that capacity does not equal capability. Okay, so sometimes we need to interpret this fatigue as a need for more recovery. Now, the third piece was external stress load. So, just as in running or training, the other stressors in our life affect our pace, so our business does not exist in isolation. Our leadership does not exist in isolation. And this is why there's such a big push to bring more parts of our whole into the workplace, to bring more parts of our whole into everything that we do, and to embrace a little bit of vulnerability. So, telling the story about being up late with your kids or your dog being sick, or not to the point of massively oversharing, but to the point of showing that you are actually a human being is really, really important rather than, coming to work, coming to volunteer, coming to training, seeing yourself as some machine, embracing all of the parts of yourself. Now, the fourth thing is around with running and in life is small changes in our nutrition, our hydration, if we're taking on too much coffee, if we'd had too much alcohol the night before. All of these things can impact on our effort and our performance, and they can make us sluggish in the workday as well. So, respecting our energy system as our operating system, not just if we are athletes, but in our lives. Those of you that work with me will know that my entry level offering is a performance pulse assessment, which essentially assesses our energy, our vitality, our alignment, our connection through those three lenses. And you will leave with 3 micro steps for you to help you to be a little bit more vital, to have a little bit more energy, to have a little bit more purpose, and just to start taking steps in the right direction. But energy management for me is such a core part of leadership and vitality and actually leaving the legacy, living the lives that we'd hope for. And then the fifth piece in terms of our running pace is environment and variables. And that's things like humidity, weather, terrain, all of these things which will affect our performance. And often we don't factor them in. And so in business and in work, this is our environment. What are the relationships like around us? What are the team dynamics? How much time are we spending managing relationships rather than managing the work that we need to do? How much time are we spending trying to be harmonious rather than engaging in respectful communication? What is our physical workspace like? There are so many things that feed into our environment that can actually be draining for us. And we need to learn to navigate this terrain that we're in. And then the final bonus piece is looking at a big warning sign is when slowness and constant sluggishness, so in training, but also in our business and our lives, when this becomes a systemic problem. If we're constantly overwhelmed, if we constantly lack momentum, if we're constantly irritable, if even simple things are just creating more and more friction, what do we need to do about it? And I guarantee that the key is not to push harder. It's actually to step back, to see what we can delete, to see what the bigger picture vision is, and to see how we can take some little micro breaks before we take that next step forwards. So I would encourage you, if you're listening today, to stop measuring yourself solely by pace and endlessly pushing forwards and output, and start measuring things like your clarity, your fulfillment, your decision quality, your energy, your connection to purpose, how close you are to your big vision, the impactful tasks that you've done today. If it's a slow day, maybe lower your expectations of how much you're going to do, but maintain your standards around the work that you do actually do, and adjust your volume. And remember that recovery is a strategic move and it's not weakness. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow for more from Endures. Bye.